A lot about. You know what? I'll save this one for the air.
No, yeah, it's good. I think I am good. I'm just gonna test on the stream.
Okay.
OBS is running it. It is okay. It looks like it's happening. OBS is
Yeah.
running. Okay,
Cool.
yeah, it sounds good. Hopefully people. I don't know. I've like never done actually streaming. Like I've like streamed me playing a game on Twitch and no one watched. But
Yeah.
we'll see how this goes.
We're up. We're up. Well,
We're
I
up.
can see your keyboard. I can see you're playing around on your mouse.
Okay, cool. All right, I'm gonna make it like this, and we'll go
Boom.
full
There we are. Beautiful.
screen. Okay.
Beautiful.
All
Okay.
right.
Yeah.
Well, we might have some other folks join us at some point. Maybe so, maybe not. This is sort of spur of the moment. Hi, everybody. This has been Yudishin with Unpopular Front. You can see over there, there's Jeff Bearwolf from Good Morning Comrade, a friend. I'd say this feels gross to say because of a big reason why we're talking today, but he's like a crew member, right? Like they used to say on
Yeah.
TMBS.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of us in left-wing media, especially sort of the democratic socialist world in particular, are really mourning the loss of Michael Brooks.
Hmm.
He was the best in the game, I have to say. Always was my fave. This whole sort of post 2015, 2016 explosion of new independent media voices and podcast and YouTube and I guess Twitch. That's not my thing, but it's a thing.
Yeah.
He was one of the most special, most articulate, most principled,
Fucking funny.
and one of the funniest guys out there.
Hmm.
And this week he died at the age of
It was 30,
37.
37. Yeah.
37. It's crazy. My 33rd birthday is tomorrow, and I couldn't imagine. Just
Happy birthday tomorrow.
yeah, I know. It's my wife's birthday on Friday too. So we were having a really good Monday, and then in the middle of my therapy session, I got a text from you,
Fuck.
and I had to stop. I had to stop.
Did that.
I couldn't keep going. I like tried to process it in real time with my therapist, and
I
it
didn't
was
realize that I was the one that broke the news to you.
yeah. Well, I was with the kid that day, and I was talking. I was on Twitter while they slept,
Hmm.
as you do, and I saw that the Majority Report ended early that day, just sort of very suddenly, which like never happens. I've been watching that show since the Air America days, basically.
Yeah.
I think not until recently I like basically hadn't missed a show
Oh.
for almost a decade. Um, so I knew like how they handle like, oh, Sam's son has to be picked up at daycare or
Yeah.
some shit, you
Yeah.
know?
You little shit.
Yeah, exactly. But this was different. You could tell, and there was just this lingering fear. And Michael was the one who wasn't in the office that day, and
Hmm.
I thought maybe something bad happened to him, and something really bad happened, and it's so tragic. I've never cried about a media figure or an artist. I didn't cry when David Bowie died, and David Bowie's like one of my favorites. I didn't cry when Prince died. Prince was one of my favorites. But there was something about Michael. Maybe it was just sort of the amount of time I spent listening to him on the weekly. Like I think about all these times in my own life where it really was the soundtrack of my life.
Hmm. Or at least
And
playing in the background or
yeah,
something.
yeah, no, I mean, but it very few people, I think, really helped me articulate my own politics, and not in a way that I felt like I was just copying him, but in a way that I really felt like he was such a good broadcaster and brought so much humanity and intelligence to it that he really it almost always felt like you were in a conversation. That you were always kind of like I probably have written 20, 30 pieces, essays, podcast episodes or something that are directly jumping off of something that I heard Michael Brooks say and that I looked into. You know, he brought me back to Marxism in a lot of ways, something I always was pretty much a socialist from the time I kind of knew what that was. And I always sort of understood sort of some of the very broad ideas of Marxism from like, freshman year of college level kind of stuff.
Right.
But, in that time period was also a time of great left retreat, right? And it was a time when that wasn't really a thing that people were really felt comfortable describing themselves as, or really, most importantly, using these tools.
And let's be clear about that part. That like one of the things that like specifically about like Majority Report, that kind of came up initially during like after the Iraq War, essentially.
Yeah.
And it sort of that was when it was like Sam and Janine Garoppolo.
Yeah.
And then sort of they, parted ways, and Air America Radio was just
run by like 5 different hucksters,
which is kind of cool. I mean, I love hucksters.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I think. But when Michael came in, and when they didn't first put on my radar, because I hadn't listened since the Air America days. I probably started 2010. But it was right in the thick of Obama mania. I mean, like the 2012 and 2011 elections. Like there was, I remember. I mean, I'm sorry, 2011 running up into the 2012 election. I should say, was one of these times where there was no space to go further left than Obama in a real way. And that was sort of like codified in language by like the sort of left-right consensus, despite the fact that it was, they have their, range of places where they would sort of like mark who's where.
Right.
They operate in tandem, and they do still to this day. But one of the things that I remember specifically about that time is that people like Sam and Michael, that was about when I started listening, it was fascinating to me because like I had listened to mostly only mainstream stuff prior to that, and they were like so critical of Obama, and it's like from the left, which is just it wasn't happening at all.
No.
And that's like when it kind of came in, and I think I started listening probably shortly before Michael came on.
Yeah.
It was a lot of Matt Binder.
Yeah. No, I mean, and it was, that the revived version of the Majority Report. I remember when it first came back, I was living in Olympia, Washington, and I was like intensely depressed. I was like not leaving my apartment. I was just like completely unsure of who I was, what my place in the world was, and sort of what the direction of the world could be, And I think the revived version of the show, there were a few key moments of it really becoming what I think it is now, and has been really like a model for, I mean, the Chapo guys this week basically said something that I always kind of suspected, but they never said it. And I mean, I almost wish they had before Michael died, but like that Michael and Sam, in many ways, although I'm not a huge fan of this term, I mean, they, in a lot of ways, help define, especially the most humane version of the dirtbag left, right? Like,
it kind of opened the door.
It opened the door, right? Like it really.
And I like ideas.
Yeah. What?
And I love ideas.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Ideas. Yeah. But like they really did, and it's easy to put it all on sort of maybe certain things that maybe are more financially successful or have more notoriety or create more controversy. But I really always felt that Sam Cedar held a torch for a long time. But it was when Michael joined the show and they really started to build this sort of comedic rapport and intellectual, like, um, like a real exchange of ideas, right? Like really going for it and not being afraid to talk over people's like not being afraid that you're going too high or too intellectual or too conceptual with your humor, you
Well,
know?
you can break it down too.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're always able to sort of like if they ever did get to that point, there was sort of it was a ramp and
Mm-hmm.
not like a launch pad. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It was sort
Yeah.
of like ease on like a
Mm-hmm.
railroad.
Yeah.
You know, tracks.
And there's something about both of them, but especially Michael, and that I've really been thinking a lot about. And this is a thing he sort of talks about in his book, and also has talked about a lot, and is a thing that is very much still present. I mean, his sister in the Majority Report stream talked about it, and I can see how there's a certain kind of leftist who will see that she said that he was sick of the current formulation of identity politics and cancel culture. That'll be like, oh, he's some like reactionary whatever. But it's because he wanted us to be better, because he knew that we were human, and that in that human spirit there is something that transcends a lot of these sort of historical things that are weighing on the minds of the living, right?
Right.
And that it's in that conflict that we can get better, and that it shouldn't. Well, and especially his critique of some of these modes was really about not being critical and not
Yeah.
being honest and not asking for people in power to do better, but also to recognize who is your comrade, who are you attacking for your own value. And the hilarious thing was I was seeing people do the exact fucking shit that honestly inspired me about his work and has been a huge thing that has honestly made me feel like I have any purpose at all in doing this show and reaching out to people like you and other folks online and in person,
Uh-huh.
that it's not hopeless,
No.
but that we shouldn't just have to give in to whatever we feel like will be the easiest either,
Well,
you know?
one of the things also that I kind of really appreciate, especially with how he talked about identity politics, he was very clear about his sort of position on that.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't directly like dismissive of the idea or the concepts or the most importantly the people because and this kind of informed the way I think about it as well. Like the way that individuals feel and the way that individuals talk about their experiences are to a degree, like or to a certain extent, especially as on the individual level, they're extremely valid,
Yeah.
and you can't deny them. At the same time, in terms of how they sort of operate politically, um, they sort of, I mean, they can cause these division lines that we sort of like dividing lines that we fight one another on. Now at the same time, Michael didn't look at it that way. He looked at it more as like these are lines that of struggle that we would sort of like he wouldn't talk to somebody who was talking about identity politics unless they were doing an extremely self-serving way,
Mm-hmm.
dismissively. He would talk
No.
to them empathetically. One of the people that he had on a lot who talks about these sorts of things is Malika Jabali,
Mm-hmm.
and there are agreements that I have with her in terms of like first off, I think she's a fantastic writer,
Yeah.
and I think she's really thoughtful. Her piece that she wrote on Michigan voters of color and how they were just completely abandoned by the Democratic Party, like that is amazing reporting.
Yeah.
But she will from time to time, and she's doing this in good faith, I'm sure. Um, she would sort of like make sort of what I would call, essentialized or essentialist arguments. It would seem, and he would have her on the show as a very close crew member and
Mm-hmm.
friend,
Yeah.
and talk it out and not sort of like well, that doesn't matter, and we don't need to talk about that. Let's move on.
Exactly.
And he didn't take shortcuts like that.
Yeah, no shortcuts. And also, that a way he always talked about that I think is important for all of us, regardless of any sort of maybe approach towards analysis, because that's what a lot of this is. It's not really about the actions that we're taking. It's it's basically, it's philosophy discussions, and like that can go all over the place, and it's
Yeah.
very easy to find things that you can disagree with someone when there's no material stake, right? Or there's no like way to truly test it because the world is so complex. You can't actually create a control group, right?
Yeah. Well,
And
it's like what
yeah.
Kushbaum talks about online, being specifically online, but being a place where you operate without friction.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, when you're like, it's funny because like we're talking about Michael. He wouldn't get into fights on the internet or online, and he talked about why he wouldn't,
Mm-hmm.
because that is the worst way to actually, like, 120 or 240 characters on Twitter with maybe a picture or a video is a very terrible way to actually hammer out what people actually really think. And he took people at, when appropriate. Obviously, Dave Rubin's a special case,
Sure,
and
yeah.
many others. But he took people at their word and engaged from there, and that's something that is really missing from how we kind of communicate with one another. And that's, I mean, I'm not the best at that. I try to do okay,
Yeah.
but
No, it's really hard. And when I feel myself feeling an urge to sort of, to want to dunk on someone, I think about a lot of the stuff that Michael has said and sort of how he connected. This was a thing I talked about with Joshua Kahn Russell on the last episode, which
great episode, by the way.
and just the fact that I was able to talk to him right before Michael died, it really, I mean, I thought about him and David Griscom and David Slavic a lot over the past few days, because those are the guys from that orbit that I've spoken to the most.
Yeah.
And knowing
he was so like, he had such nice things to say about Michael yesterday too. Gosh,
Yeah.
well, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
No, but like I think Russell really kind of shows a really important aspect, I think, of why Michael was so special. And it was, first off, the fact that this is a thing that wasn't even really in the interview, but we sort of talked about it before, just to kind of about how, like, in a lot of movement spaces and different media platforms, you kind of have to code switch, right? You have to kind of pick, what am I going to emphasize here? And Joshua kind of talked about how, like, in a lot of the movements that he was in some context, he was like, I feel like I'm the class reductionist there, but then when I go on Michael's show, I feel like I'm like the, like, racial justice above all else guy. But the thing is that what that really and what is really beautiful, I think, was that the fact that first off, that he could just introduce us to amazing people like Joshua, like so many other guests, and that Michael was able to have some incredible conversations with some, like, of the most prominent intellectuals of our time, but that there was always a place in the work that Michael did and almost sort of his, like, philosophy. Like, I feel like he was so iconoclastic in some ways because he brought in that humanity and that spirit, not just sort of spiritualism in a kind of, like, hokey way, not in the way of the baby witches hexing the moon or whatever that fucking bullshit was, right?
Oh, let's not call that bullshit.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I don't want them to hex me.
You're next.
Yeah, I know.
I know. Now.
Yeah. No, honestly, on the witches thing, I think it's cool that they did that. Personally,
Oh, yeah.
I think it's more the reaction that was funny to me.
I don't mean to derail, but yeah, he had a very, like, interesting and like a very like he was very open about being a spiritual person,
Mm-hmm.
and he talked about how he did Buddhist meditations. He even made fun of himself, and
Yeah.
a caller yesterday on the show made reference to a time where he was at a silent retreat and called into the Majority Report and communicated only through the phone, like
Yes. Oh,
pressing
that's
buttons on
so
the phone, which
funny.
is hilarious.
So funny. And that's like a reminder of a reason I think why maybe Michael is really important to a lot of people. He reminded them of themselves or the
Right.
best aspects of themselves. Because
And
I
he was
also couldn't shut the fuck up either, you know?
I still can't shut the fuck up. That's why I
Yeah.
have a radio show and a
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah. And you're on this one. That's like
Yeah,
so
yeah.
many. So
This
many.
guy,
But the thing though is it wasn't just sort of doing rituals to improve productivity. It was to remind him and
yeah,
remind us through his work how interconnected we are. And not in that kumbaya way, but in the way that like we are all human. And
literally fucking connected people.
yeah, like we are all human. And in that, there's a complexity. But
Hmm.
that also means that there is a sort of baseline that we all deserve. And
Yeah.
that capitalism builds social relationships that are all about abusing that.
Yep.
And as much as you want to say that may be like, oh yeah, but this group is like really evil, it's really, really important, and it's a thing that I never want to let go of. That Michael taught me how, and I've seen this a lot in the remembrances of him. How like people are good, and
Mm.
people can change, and
Right.
I think the work Michael did, being kind but ruthless with the ideas, being kind with the people but ruthless with the systems,
Exactly.
helped probably stop so many people from turning into hard right reactionaries, help
Hmm.
people become more tolerant, help people learn about people outside of America, helped us de-racialize our understandings of our neighbors, and really, really connect all of these different struggles in a real strong, like humanist, universalist, Marxist way, right? And that is an
Fundamental equality
instinct.
amongst all.
What?
Fundamentally, like we're all in this together. Like they say
Yeah,
that on the show, all on the Majority Report all the time
yeah,
about that same sort of like line. We are in the same. We're in this together. All of it.
right. And that we have to think about beyond, um, like, I mean, it's a thing. Some people get annoyed when you talk about this shit, but, like the vampire castle and all that kind of shit. Like, yes, some people bring it up too much. Some people get annoyed when Ben Burgess says it every other sentence, but honestly, it's fine. Because
Hmm.
he's right about a lot of that, by the way. But also
The
that,
metaphor is a little bit much, but yeah,
yeah,
the point
the
is
point is correct
yeah.
because, and this was the thing that Michael was so good at, because he never for a second ever said that anyone deserved anything less than to live in a just, humane, egalitarian society where people had the right to be themselves.
Yeah.
Always. That was always the foundation of it. But
Right.
it was never about um, trying to use the fact that he maybe had an idea that he thought was better to score points on another person or to build social capital, particularly on the left.
Hmm.
Because so often, and I mean, fuck, I saw this shit after Michael died, and it pissed me off so much that people were trying to score points, being like, this person didn't grieve correctly, or why are you grieving more about this person than another person, or someone saying like, I'm gonna, like, oh my god, there's so many fucking people online that
I
like,
didn't see any of that, honestly.
thank
Wow.
God, there
Yeah.
were a few people. There was that woman who had that whole meltdown about Glenn Greenwald and David Miranda having too big of an age difference like a few weeks ago.
Mhm.
She was like making some really weird statements about basically like subtweeting Megan Day, who are like a really beautiful, very kind-hearted thing about Michael, being like, yeah, when someone mildly famous dies, I'm gonna act like I was their best friend too. Like, fuck you. And honestly, here's the thing: that is capitalism in your mind,
Uh-huh.
and I don't think I would have really understood that without Michael. And the ways that there are things in my head because we live in a society that is built on competition and built on that all against all.
Yeah.
And instead of just constantly thinking about how I'm right and I'm going to destroy my enemy, Michael was thinking about how I'm right and how I'm going to turn my enemy into my ally.
Yeah. Or if I can't do that, I'll find more allies and we'll just crowd you
Exactly.
out.
Exactly.
It's really sad to hear. Because yeah, that is a very sort of one against all sort of like clout
It's
in
the
all.
clout game, right? Yeah.
And, but I guess what I had seen, mostly even on Twitter, which is a dreadful website that I
Hmm.
just can't log off of. It's wild. But I mean, I'd seen almost overwhelmingly positive,
Yeah.
nice things that were said about the guy.
Yeah.
People that I wouldn't even expect, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. No. There was a
Safar
lot. Yeah.
wrote a really fantastic article, and he ended it with a one of Michael's best bits,
Hmm.
which was what was I think it was Bill Clinton like saying doing the "if I did it" or something like that. Let me find it.
Was that about like Seth Rich or something? Or like,
Let me find it.
yeah, it's very, very funny. He was so funny.
Yeah. Ugh. Ugh. Front page. I mean, they have article. I mean, Micah Utrecht wrote an article about it now too, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to read that one now. I'm giving myself a lot of homework.
Yeah.
uh, let's see here. Uh, but yeah, it's just a really weird time with all this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's
Those bits that he, I mean,
yeah.
like we were talking before
Yeah.
we got on air about the Ken and Ken show
Of
and some of
course.
the things that he had ever done. I mean, god damn, what a like he could carry on a completely insane bit for like 6 minutes. I remember somebody posted like right after he had died, and I'm glad that they had done this because like I'm one of these like remember the good times schmaltzy guys, you
Sure.
know what I mean?
Totally.
But somebody posted a bit of Michael doing Bernie Sanders for like a 3 minute bit of doing Bernie Sanders in character of like how to become a millionaire.
Yes. That one's so funny, right? Yeah. Like because he
Low
just
for your 30s and then you become a small town mayor. You know?
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, be a carpenter and a preschool teacher. That's the way to become a millionaire.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It was I mean, it's just like the fact that Lula and Chomsky
My God.
and Cornell West are
Yeah.
all outliving Michael is insane to me. And I
Mhm.
remember in like the past few weeks he was saying he was about to interview Angela Davis. Like,
Damn, that's amazing.
and it's just like fuck.
Yeah, he scored some really good
He
interviews.
really did. I
Later
think
in his
I
life.
think he was the only person who I could ever really see who could actually have a conversation with Slavoj Žižek. Not just have Slavoj Žižek talk at you. He could keep him in line
That
and
was cool
and not
because
go on some weird tirade, but could sort of keep it focused and like in a way it's very indicative of the kind of thing that he brought to left media. And I think that is just proof of like a really talented broadcaster is not just that like oh he could have a good interview or something like that, but that there is so much energy, and we live in an era of information overload. Duh,
yeah,
this is not a new thing for me to say, but like there is too much we can care about, But what Michael was really good at was he was sort of good at like building and like digging those canals that could
Yeah.
then turn that waterfall and turn that flood into a river and
Yeah.
into the thing that will give us water, will give us power, will give us life.
Yeah.
You know? And like it's easy to just get a ton of information and just get worked up and just feel righteous in your rage. But Michael
Right.
was never about that. Sorry, what?
Yeah, I have a weapon. I have to use this now, right? Or I have a tool. I have
Right.
to use this now. You know, I
Yeah.
have a new analysis that's but the new one, and that's the new hot shit. Which is
Yeah.
also another very sort of like, sort of liberal like capitalist way of thinking, right?
Yeah, I have to maximize the use of this in the shortest amount of time because what if this isn't actually worth that much? And I got to keep moving. I got to keep going.
Sell high, baby.
Yeah, sell high. Well, and the funny thing is, Michael was such like a he was like a guy who like knew marketing and like knew brands.
Yeah.
Like I used to listen to his old podcast he did, which was basically about brands.
What was his old podcast?
It's called Two Dope Boys in a Podcast.
Yeah.
And it was really what?
Is that what Wozni?
No. It's with another guy, Phil.
Okay.
But who was like a guy who like he like worked at Goldman, you know, like he worked at Goldman Sachs and was like, you know, it was just very interesting to me that he could find that because the thing that I think is missing, and I feel it in my head all the time of, well, this isn't like a thing that I can learn from because it's not like a left thing.
Yeah.
You know, and Michael was very open about like he thinks that we need to read more business books and less theory in some ways, right? Like more history, more strategy, less like theory and, you know, like I don't know. I'm just thinking of all those million books that are on. Yeah.
Just read more books, I guess. But the books, yeah, like what you're saying essentially is that like there is a sort of strategic knowing what you're dealing with component that engages as opposed to there is like a sort of self-purification, like a puritanical component that I'm definitely subject to it to a certain extent as well.
Yeah.
And all of us are. But you have to sort of make yourself uncomfortable and engage with with the thoughts and ideas. I like ideas of your enemy, so that you can understand how to combat them. It's almost like a little bit like very basic Sun Tzu. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like very art of war shit.
Yeah, I mean, he basically was like saying that like the left needs as much Machiavelli as we do, you know, Cornel West or like moral philosophy, right? Like that there is an importance to strategy. And I've spoken with some people, a lot of people online who tend to be, I don't know, sort of like people I've been struggling with this in general. I think we need to abandon the term leftist, but it's a longer term thing because it prioritizes being more left, whatever that means, you know?
At least time out or something like that so we can like let it cool off. Nice Whataburger shirt, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm a big fan. Every time I go home to Texas, my first thing, and this is another thing that my wife makes fun of me for, about how the second we land, I'm always like, when are we gonna go to Whataburger? When are we gonna go? And what was I thinking? Yeah, but that Michael understood strategy not as a moderating force, but as a force for acceleration of our ends, right?
I'm sorry.
No. And that there's an instinct, I think, on the left, particularly of our generation, because we grew up in an era of left politics being basically just either just like trying to build things that an NGO will fund, or having a dumb Trotskyist reading group, which six old guys go to, you know?
Right.
And in the past decade, we've had a real resurgence of like explicitly socialist and I would say abolitionist politics as that sort of grows. And those are terms that can mean a lot of different things, right? but they are growing, and there are wins being had, and a lot of those wins are being built on mass support and mass mobilization, right? Like here in Seattle, people have been trying to stop the construction of a new youth jail for, God, like a decade.
Right.
Like they've been slowly building it for ages. But it wasn't until now, when there's mass support, that they were actually able to do something. This is not to discount the work that like the people of the No Youth Jail group
No, it's
have
foundational.
done. But what it is showing is that we can have the most correct group, and we can have the best theory, but it's in that moment of pouncing on it and using strategy and finding ways to connect these issues that you can make those wins. And I really think Michael
Like
knew that and represented that mindset incredibly well. And he rejected a lot of left orthodoxy on some of this stuff around ideas like the Overton window sort of being the end all be all way of how we should think about politics, and this idea that if you know, it's a very basic, and it's an example, I think, in some ways, and maybe this is a weird thing to talk about because I'm just sort of pontificating now, but I feel like so much of this is inspired by Michael's thought and how we need to always be willing to be better for humanity. It's
Yeah.
for people. It's not we're trying to be better so we can have more control over a particular movement. It's so we can be better so we can have wins that last.
Mhm.
So,
Let me
yeah,
put a personal example to what you're talking about.
sure.
So I think I've talked about this with you, but I mean, like one of the things that I've been doing, and I'm not like patting myself on the back. I'm very much exploring this situation with friends. By the way, I have some people in the local DSA who are not doing this like as the organization, but we've had people from here, and this is sort of a little bit internally, not controversial, but it's not exactly something that's like um, smiled upon, or like most
Hmm.
people are sort of like, why are you wasting your time doing that? But we're engaging with the local and state Democratic Party, and like many of
Hmm.
us ran for like office in the Democratic Party, and most or very a lot of leftists and you know socialists or whatever you want to call them, DSA members or whatever, to say like, why are you wasting your time? You know, you're
Hmm.
going to get co-opted, you're going to make concessions, and you're going to become one of them, and or whatever. And I mean, the reasons that I engage with this one is because I'm very curious about what's going on here. I live in a southern state, in a suburb, which is like extremely like Republican and conservative.
Sure.
Um, but and so one, there's like a lot of opportunity to sort of like get in. I mean, they're elect people to these bodies are elected by, you know, like election by the Secretary of State. Um, I was able to get into both the state, local, and state parties without any opposition.
Hmm.
Um, so essentially, it's a very easy way to sort of engage with where this sort of mainstream apparatus is, and whether or not you think that it's going to be the instrument for a workers' party or whatever, or
Hmm.
it needs to be overcome. It's got to be engaged with
Right.
now in order for anything to come going forward. You can't just I mean, like, it's a beautiful idea. The idea is that like workers will just like smash the state. And maybe I'm being a little bit of a straw man, building a little bit of a straw man argument, but that's one of the things that you often hear what people say, and I actually do think that's necessary. But like, how does that get organized, and how does that engage in the meantime? You can't just wait forever. There needs to be action steps that you can take now. And I would not have done this kind of action 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever. But like, one of the things that I really appreciate about the way that the majority report functions, and Michael's a big part of this. I mean, Sam is sort of like a Gen X,
Hmm.
social democrat type
Yeah.
of guy. Michael's sort of like a young, like quasi intellectual, but still kind of like hip, kid
Mhm.
from Brooklyn, or I guess he's lived in Boston and Brooklyn. I'm not exactly sure which one. And then you have Jamie, who's kind of like a very um almost like an anarcho-communist in a certain
She
sense, and
is. I
like
think
and
that's how I've heard her describe herself.
yeah, and it's really great. And this is sort of like where I sort of like saw, okay, because the way that they're talked about, at least on in many ways on the left, is these groups of people cannot talk to one another.
Yeah.
They're like need to be fighting one another, or at least it's the sense that I get and what it feels like, and having um and it's not even to say that they always got along or agree, or any of that stuff, but to more so, there there are these three very, very influential perspectives that exist on the sort of like left
Hmm.
of
Left of
like,
liberal, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And they're interacting constantly every single day for
Hmm.
hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's something that's really like I really appreciate those Thursday shows that would happen with Jamie and Michael,
Yeah.
uh, because they would disagree often sharply.
Very sharply.
You know what? The conversation, they at least whether or not they had to work together or they chose to work together, they worked together.
I mean,
Going forward, and they talk about
there's a thing though about this that is becoming, I think, harder to achieve, in that
mhm.
both of them were kind of employees, right? Like
Right, yeah,
they were
it's
both people who sort of went to that place for work, and
mhm,
they happened to be put together. And
yeah,
it's so often that, and I mean, I think me having this conversation with particularly you versus some other people I might know is an example of, I think our politics are pretty similar, right? Um, and there is the fact that there were pretty variant views, at least in the sort of, Brooklyn-y kind of East Coast left. Obviously, there's the rest of
no,
the country. There's lots of different experiences. There's lots of different movements. No doubt. I mean, for me, it's funny because it's like, oh, it's like the three types of Jewish leftist all together. Um, it's like a what do they call it? Oh my god, what are they? Minion. When a Jewish person dies, you have to have a certain number of Jews to gather to like
yeah.
consecrate it. But there's a yeah, it's I think it's important, and that's a thing that in Michael's death I'm realizing I need to do more of. Honestly, um, I think
It,
yeah,
if you would let me share my screen. I can do a clip. I found that clip from Bhaskar, and he did it was the Bill Clinton "If I Did It" Epstein edition. And I think
sure.
it would be
I,
to
I,
just give
I
it a
set
watch.
it to multiple participants can share screen simultaneously, so I think that'll do it. There you go. All right, let's see what's going on.
This was the one that Bhaskar tagged at the end of his article.
Okay, let's see.
Seeing if Ben
Look at that
is
jacket,
ready.
by the way.
Deep V.
Harvey K coming through with the jokes. He said that Richard Goodstein has also accused Bernie Sanders of killing Vince Foster. That's a good one. I can see the next. I could see that. I can see Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton
Harvey's
loses his
hilarious.
shit during these
I
things.
love Harvey.
Out. And I'll tell
Actually,
you,
that is
I'll
amazing
tell
that
you
Bill's
another
been
thing.
hanging.
Bernie Sanders killed Vince Foster, and we covered it up at the time because we were trying to be allies of socialists in America. I said, Hillary, why do you think Bernie killed Vince Foster and dragged his body to the park? And she said, well, because Vince wanted people to have choice about their health care, so Bernie killed him. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I think Bill's been kind of quiet for the past 8 months or so. Remember when he wrote that thing in the Washington Post and New York Times? That's just like keep the economy going, guys. Like just the most generic.
Oh
like,
yeah.
motivation
It's
thing.
like the midterms are no. Yeah, he wrote
Yeah, I
that thing
remember
that
this.
looked like it sounded like it was written in 1990. Like it was literally like 1995. Like it was like AOL is entirely changing how we communicate. We are entering a information superhighway.
And by the way, I'm not in hiding because of what's going on with Ghislaine and Jeffrey.
Look forward to my next mystery novel, which I'm co-writing, called If I Did It, Jeffrey Epstein Plain Edition. The takeoff of the concept, except it's If I Did It, Jeffrey Epstein Plain Edition. So in other words, if I was on the plane,
If I boarded it,
and I knew that it was a giant predator child trafficking wing, what would I have done?
if I, who used to be the man who could command most of the intelligence organizations that you'd ever need to, determine a question like that.
If I ran an intelligence apparatus that regularly targeted powerful people by exploiting their most grotesque sexual appetites imaginable as blackmail, and was close friends with two of the most prodigious human traffickers in human history, and I went on that plane and knew what was going on, what would have happened? That's why it's called If I Did It, Jeffrey Epstein Plain Edition by Bill Clinton.
So good.
It's like the OJ. Y'all remember when OJ wrote that book? You like Bill Clinton when he gets real like pedantic in a fun way. It's just like, y'all remember when everybody was all mad because OJ wrote that book, If I Did It? Everybody said Judith Reed should have published it. Well, I thought he should have, because we need a full accounting of what happened, which is why I'm working on a book. And of course, I'm not saying I did, but if I did, what did I know about what was happening on Jeffrey Epstein? If I did it, Jeffrey Epstein Plain Edition. All right.
Oh,
We're going to take a very
good.
That was very
Man.
good. I mean, like,
I love that shit.
he's able to just like slide in, like not only did he like start sliding into that almost, I hate to bring it up in these terms, but it is kind of improv-y.
Yeah.
But like not like improv-y in like an improv go to classes way, if you know what I mean.
Right. Yeah.
It's sort of like so quickly, like, okay, we're doing Bill Clinton, we're doing Epstein. Okay, let's tie it to fucking O.J. Simpson.
Why not?
If I did it.
Why not? It's brilliant.
And it just came together and was a bit instantly.
Yeah, totally. Sorry, I stopped your screen sharing because I'm a authoritarian.
Us, yeah.
I'm the Joseph Zabimbi. You see, like that's a reference that I feel like Michael could do much better job with than me. I don't even know who Joseph Zabimbi is.
I mean, but he did Right Wing Mandela.
Oh yeah.
He did Nation of Islam Obama.
One of the best.
Oh my God. And
The
he would just like slide into them in
in and
middle
out.
there.
Not a
And-
problem. Yeah,
And they
I
would
know.
sometimes like do like bits of commentary on his own bit. It was very, very,
Yeah.
very.
It's very funny, and it just like it's like I feel like this has been a thing people have been saying for ages. God, this sounds like a thing people said about the Daily Show back in the 2000s, which was inherently flawed due to many reasons. I would say probably more than anything, just it's like the production nature of it, like the productive nature and being built on a sort of particular kind of profit motive.
Being
Like
owned by Viacom.
exactly, like it can't actually do what people were saying it did do. But I kind of feel like in some way, Michael, even more than Sam in a lot of ways, because Michael brought a lot of like philosophy and I don't know, just a sort of another aspect of the humanic experience in. Like Sam was always just so coldly rational, right? Which is very important, particularly in the time that he was, and I think now even more important because so much of the left is it's very based on sort of a frustration and anger and emotions, which are very important, but are not in and of themselves politics or analysis or a reason to do something. It's just a feeling, which is important, but it's not everything. But Michael sort of was able to educate through humor in a way that really few people can. At most of the time when people do topical or political comedy, what it really ends up being is it's just they find a point that people tend to agree on, and then you just make jokes up around it. What Michael did is he found that point of conversation and then built jokes that added in different aspects, and it kept on building and it expanded.
Right.
And then that's how there was
There's a
so much.
canon. Like there's a canon to Nation of Islam Obama.
Absolutely.
There's a story to right wing Mandela. There's
Yeah, there's a canon, but it also like I think like legitimately sort of shows like let's take right wing or let's do NOI Obama, right? Like it showed both the insanity of the right wing conspiracy theories about Obama. And I loved Michael's whole little thing in it that he wasn't like he wasn't really like an NOI guy. He was like a Iranian Shia guy. You know, he was a 12er. Like, what the fuck? Why would you think of that? How would you think of that? But that, you know, but it also sort of, it simultaneously sort of taught me a little bit about Islam, you know? But it also sort of,
he had to be knowledgeable about this.
Exactly.
Like, he was very knowledgeable about Islam.
Exactly.
And he's very knowledgeable about like religions and cultures the world over. But I'm sorry.
No, but it also was a way to, I think, show, like, this might sound grandiose, right? But because it's like a dumb comedy bit, right? But like it showed to me the dangers of particular kinds of nationalism in particular context. And in many ways, he was helping. Maybe this is just because I was also trying to do my like homework, learning about Malcolm X, particularly in the end of his life and the path of the NOI, after Elijah Muhammad and sort of Elijah Muhammad's kids, which were honestly, they were much more moderate, kind of in the way that late in life Malcolm was, where he sort of took sort of Orthodox Sunni and Sufi Islam and was basically trying to do something akin to like the Third World Movement, like in a lot of ways, which is essentially as a democratic socialist project. Like it maybe didn't say it that way, but it was about autonomy of people having the freedom to decide their own life and the way that their own economy is built. Not being dependent on colonial extraction, not being dependent on corporate overlords, and not being dependent on like racialized ruling classes from outside of their own place. And
I want to hear the illicit history on Malcolm X.
yeah, but like in some ways, the insanity of that character and the sort of like ridiculous silliness also, I think, was in many ways incredibly unifying.
Yeah.
You know? And the fact that we're not going to have that is just, it's going to take a long time for there to be any single person like him. And I think we were coasting in a lot of ways in left media on having some really talented people or some people that just, maybe had some good chemistry at some time. And I feel like this is as big of a moment as any about sort of, I think, for folks to come around, and I say folks with an X, okay? But that we need to come around. Yeah, exactly. I need to talk to Ari about that. They have some very intense opinions on folks with an X. As a queer person, that is a little unorthodox, and I am not going to say it on my own. But I've been canceled by myself. But Michael was really focused on unity in a real, true way. Mm-hmm. He wasn't focused on unity so the people who are already in power will have more people to support them, right? He wasn't focused on unity so he could win an argument. He wasn't focused on unity for like a moralist plea to have people stop being mad at him. He was focused on unity because that's the way we win, and unity and respect was the fundamental building block of his politics, and that is about, and that is in many ways what socialism, and particularly democratic socialism, represents.
So to further that point too, it wasn't like unity, like a valueless, principleless, just like, oh, let's just all get along, kumbaya. Like that's not the idea. That's not the point. The point is, together, we have the power to seize the power of the world, of the state, of whatever, powerful apparatus, whatever distributes resources, wherever they're concentrated. That is the only way it's going to be distributed to everyone. If it's a small group that's sort of like fractions off, even if and this speaks to the clarity of vision, right? If there's a section of like the left, if like the, let's just say the Maoists are right or whatever, and one Maoist group takes over, they're going to operate in that group's interests, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there needs to be a long-term, permanent, and I don't mean to talk that much shit about Maoists or whatever, but like there needs to be a long-term, permanent building of a working class movement, and it cannot just become from one particular place. There needs to be a synthesis of multiple ideas.
Yeah, constant, and that needs to be something that is constantly being worked on.
The best of all perspectives need to be what's in front, and it's not a zero-sum situation.
Yeah, is that kind of what dialectics is? A little bit? Is that kind of what it is? Like, it's not about just having your thesis and defending it until you die, right? It's not about just hating your antithesis. It's about synthesis.
Yeah.
At least how I've understood it.
Yeah.
I'm a college dropout, though. Hey, grad student leftist, tell me how I'm wrong. Give me a 30-page PDF. I won't read it, but I'll look at the title.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know, but
no, but that's a great point too. Like he was like, and this is another thing that Michael, I think, was very good at, that I strive to do. I'm not particularly like, I haven't read all of my theory or whatever, but he had, and he was able to talk about it in terms that are relatable, and terms that are actually tangible and that people can grab onto because they experience it in their real lives. And putting it in real terms, which is the 30-page article that you were just talking about that the grad student wrote. I mean, like, I'm glad that the grad student knows all this shit.
Right.
You're not going to need it though.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a really big loss. Honestly, here's one thing that I wish. Oh man, all I want to know is what would Michael say about the naked yoga lady in Portland?
Whoa, tell me about the naked yoga lady.
You don't know about the naked yoga lady? Is this like a Pacific Northwest thing?
I think y'all just have your own bubble up there,
We
and where you have
kinda
beautiful trees, you have a lot of clouds and like lime green buildings or something.
Yeah, lots of Well, so there was, there's been it's had a lot more of a federal presence, but it's similar to kind of what was going on here a few weeks ago. They don't really have something akin to the CHOP, and which is honestly, I think, good, because the CHOP had some major problems, particularly around security and like fucking the John Brown gun club people, like basically, I don't know, but they basically just did what they're protesting against the cops doing, which is killing innocent black teenagers. But which was just like that was a really hard moment. That was like, fuck people.
You're just making new cops if that's the case. If that's true. You know?
I mean, there were teens, like young kids who lived in the area who died. And there was also right-wing saboteurs, of course, but I think this is the kind of thing, though, that was so great about Michael, was he wasn't concerned about always protecting the left flank at all cost, and that whatever the left does is correct. He was so supportive of DSA, but also incredibly critical of not being the best they can be, you know? And I think that's important that we're able to hold both of those at once. But the reason why I bring up the naked yoga lady, is that Michael was like he was like a yoga guy, right? He was like a Buddhist and into like, you know, I guess dharmic mysticism, which would include, you know, Buddhism, Hinduism, maybe some Taoism. But there was this lady in this giant, there's been a lot of riots and protest and a lot of state violence in Portland over the past few weeks in particular. There have been videos and stories of people who are sort of unmarked federal agents, they say. Again, this is all very vague, and you don't want to like create a narrative that isn't totally like known to be 100% correct, so I want to be relatively journalistic in this. But there absolutely was no doubt extreme state violence, tear gas, people basically being abducted Jakarta method style, like fucking awful stuff, and like a thing that is fascistic. Like a lot of people say basically everything Trump does is fascistic, which is wrong. But this is like a policy that actually fits within that framework. And there was this picture that came out of this woman, white lady. I mean, she was naked. So, and she was sitting in like a lotus position on the ground in front of like a line of cops in riot gear. Yeah. And it went viral because there's a sort of, you know, you have found it, right?
She's wearing a hat.
Oh, never mind. She's not naked. That is kind of funny. Yeah, she's wearing a hat. I wonder if there was someone there being like, ma'am, you need to wear a mask, ma'am. Ma'am, where's your mask, ma'am?
She had a mask on.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's the other direction. But like this thing happened, right? And it was the reason why I wish Michael was alive and I could hear his reaction about it, because a lot of people were sort of on, you know, it was a classic example of just where everybody was like, I'm right and here's how. And so much of it, everything was against this woman particularly. Right. You know, there were people who were saying like, oh, she's culturally appropriating, and she's making it about her. And then there, of course, were like, you know, the right wingers, which were just like making fun of her, like, oh, these dumbass libs think that if they like do a yoga pose, that's going to solve systemic racism, you know, or even like more reactionary people being like, yeah, I hope they fucking beat her to death, you know, like, and there were all of these reactions, and And this is one of those things that I was always really inspired by Michael in, is that his instinct, I don't know what he would have said about this, but when I thought about that, I was like, first off, if we're mad that a white person is putting their body on the line to stop police brutality that, like, in the language that we're using, disproportionately affects people of color, how is that ever a bad thing? How is that ever a bad thing? You know, and that we should be happy. He had this great explanation about, like, why are people mad about the idea of Bernie bros? I want the bros to be on the side of social and economic justice. What you would rather that they're still just like jerking each other off and doing keg stands? Like you want them on your side. That's one less person who could be recruited by the others.
Yeah.
And yeah, just this reaction to this yoga lady was just, you know, so much about like she's taking up space, or read the room, or she isn't protesting correctly, which is bizarre to hear from people who are like very pro Antifa, but like, you know, and here's the thing, I'm pro all of it. Because this is like a democratic movement, right? We have decided through history and through the lessons that the left has learned and that we are internalizing in our organizing that we're not going to have as hierarchical of a structure. We're not going to have like a Marxist-Leninist parties. That is not happening right now. We're doing more horizontalist stuff. And in that will come a variety of tactics.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as it feels so good to be like, that's stupid, or she's not doing the right kind of thing, or like, I don't know, like, why isn't she doing stoicist meditation or something, right? Because that's more, quote, Western, you know, which again shows the, you know, a lot of these currents are not East, West, Asian, European, African. It's so much of this stuff is all global and all international. And
how deeply are you searching for like something to get like for a reason to say this is wrong if you're doing that? You know,
I
mean?
Exactly. And another thing that bothered me about it was I was seeing this from a lot of people who describe themselves as feminist or, you know, allies of feminist. And I don't know if I'm a feminist because there are so many different versions of it, but I believe in the ideals that a lot of people describe as feminism, and particularly a lot of the historical struggles for feminism I definitely agree with. And guess what? Women have used their bodies in ways because we live in a society where especially a naked woman's body is intensely sexualized. Using that for the good, this is like a million times better than when fucking like, you know, PETA will like, you know, like, I don't know, like they had
wrap
those
themselves up and cover themselves in blood.
Yeah, right? Like I get it that you want to hate this person because you know what? It's a little bit cringe. But just because something's cringe, it doesn't mean it's morally reprehensible or even that it's bad tactics, you know? Like just because
tactics if it's actively hurting or marginalizing the perspective that they're putting forward, which I think PETA does. I don't think this woman's doing that.
No, because like here's the thing. First off, this thing, all of the reasons that people would be mad at this woman, and there was so much vitriol towards this woman in particular, which I just kind of
found blood on anybody.
What?
She's not throwing like fake blood on anybody.
No, she just got naked and sat on the ground. You know, like.
Up your attack to these people. Like, I don't know, the people that are making those critiques too. Like,
yeah, I just don't know. Like
can be unfair.
No. I mean, I a lot of these people are people who, just are sort of always like they always have the new phrase to describe whatever they are, and it sort of is exhausting.
Now, my first thought about that is that it kind of reminds me. Do you remember the image from Baton Rouge from after the Alton Sterling shooting of the woman? Her name was Aisha Evans, who was standing up like in front of those cops, and it looked like those cops were like backing down, which was totally like out of context. And I think about this in a lot of these pictures, but that reminded me a lot of that in the sense that like there was this kind of, I mean, I don't know, representation of something that might have not been there.
Images are really good at doing that.
So, yeah, because like they had a series of images specifically with Aisha Evans, who was the woman, of her like getting tackled by those cops immediately after that picture. You know what I mean? And I kind of do. I don't know. I don't want to like say it's anything good or bad. I mean, it's very obviously she was there making a very particular statement, so it is different in a sense. I just find it very, very like relatable to that. Particular instance in that particular thing.
Well, and also that in these moments, and particularly in these uprisings, like more than ever, we need to recognize the spectacle of it all, right? And not necessarily that all spectacle is against us, to use the spectacle as a weapon, but also be mindful of the spectacle that can be created of us. And that was a thing Michael was really, really good at.
Yeah, symbolic politics are only good if you can use them towards your ends. Otherwise, you don't need them. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. You know, I think it's funny. I had that same conversation with Angie Speaks.
Yeah.
Who also had interactions with Michael, and she
Mhm.
was on her
Yeah.
Patreon, and her. I really respect her.
Yeah.
But she really gets into the kind of the woo woo mystical stuff and the spiritual stuff, and she had an interview with Michael about that as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah.
But she definitely is very critical of those kinds of symbolic politics.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe I've turned it around because
No.
yeah,
Well,
the way
no.
that
But the thing is that there's a symbolic politics in calling out someone else's attempt at politics.
yes, oh buddy, there it is.
Right? So it's not just that someone is doing something that you could describe as symbolic, right? Because, like, here's the thing, and this is something I've been thinking
Who's doing
about
it
a
now?
lot. This is a thing I've been thinking about a lot here in Seattle, because we've had some legitimate wins for the left here. You know, as I mentioned, we stopped the construction, or at least, I mean, it was pretty much almost all built, but they never actually started to use it, of this youth jail, kind of like smack dab in the middle of the eastern part of the city, right in the area that is sandwiched between just immense wealth and immense poverty. You know, like one of the most rundown, poorest parts of the city, right next to where all the Amazon workers are moving, right? And they were going to build this disgusting, terrible youth jail, something that we shouldn't have, like, period, much less be spending like $300 million on it while we're dealing with like a affordable housing crisis and a homelessness crisis, and we're in the middle of a fucking pandemic, you know?
It would be bad if it cost nothing.
Exactly, right? Well, and purely just because of the space it took up and what it represented about our society and how we view children.
That's symbolic right there. That's
Right.
symbolic right there.
Exactly. And we also had all this. We had a super majority of the city council. They haven't voted on it yet. They don't have the exact plan yet, so I don't want to be too hopeful. But about cutting the police budget by half, and we also got a new progressive revenue tax passed, and it's going to raise like $300 million a year. It's a decent. It's not exactly what I wanted. There was a more left wing version. But I think the fact that there was a more left-wing version put a lot of pressure on more moderate and more liberal members of the council to have to support at least something that is like 3/5 of what the more progressive, the more left version was, right? And I think I've been thinking about this a lot because, when all the uprising started, there was a lot of conversation, and there was a lot of people sort of bringing back this old Kwame Ture quote. And I have a lot of respect for Kwame Ture, also known as Stokely Carmichael, kind of the intellectual. He, along with Angela Davis, are sort of the intellectual titans of the Black Panther Party. They were sort of the theorist. If you could say Marx was sort of the theorist of the German SPD and, the Bolsheviks, right? They sort of he served a similar role. And there was this quote that was brought up a lot about non-violent protesting and about sort of the way that he sort of thought that that sort of this Kingian Gandhi-like approach of basically showing your oppressor your humanity like that. How do you do that when your oppressor has no humanity, or they're sort of willfully blinded to it and by the conditioning throughout their entire life, right? And I think in many ways that's a correct statement, but I also think that in many ways, though, these wins and like that sentiment was very strongly held, especially among the more sort of self-described radicals here. And I think this is something I wish I could have talked to Michael about, that in many ways it was And we should be grateful for this. We shouldn't be upset that it took normies seeing people being abused by the police to finally get on board, right? But it worked. Seeing people being, there is humanity within these people. Yes, they might have some ideas that we think are like retrograde, or they might like say things like, "Ooh, that's not a safe neighborhood," quote unquote, or they might be hypocrites and vote for, something that would stop more affordable housing being built so they can keep their property values high, but they put a Black Lives Matter sign in the front of their yard. Yes, those people are hypocrites. They are not consistent, but also we are building political will because they are coming around. Our mayor has a 7% approval rating now. She had like a 40% approval rating for this, and like mayors in Seattle never have a high approval rating, right? So, yes, I'm trying to do this thread, right? Because yes, symbolic politics, we can overdose on it, no doubt. And maybe this stuff wasn't symbolic, but I truly believe that seeing all these people be abused by the state, tear gas thrown at them, beat up, people really hurt and damaged, that was politics. That was the thing happening. And it's still possible for some of those tactics to work. We don't need to give up the lessons from the past because what happened in the past didn't get us to the place that we want to be now.
Mm-hmm. And we need to be honest about what the past was as well.
Yeah.
And specifically, and the sort of like dialectic between like the Kingian and the Carmichael approach. Mm-hmm. That's sort of, it's really interesting because especially today, like people will say, "Oh, be like Martin Luther King. He would never, make excuses for smashing windows or whatever." And he never condemned that kind of stuff. He acted, and that's sort of like another one of those symbolic things. And he was doing also like the sort of like peace facing front of King was to appeal to sort of those middle of the road people or whatever.
Yeah.
But like he condemned riot. He said, I pulled up a quote, "I think America must see that riots do not develop out of thin air. Certain conditions continue to exist in our society, which must be condemned as vigorously as we condemn riots. But in the final analysis, a riot is the language of the unheard. And that is what what America has failed to hear." So, I mean, like, that is exactly right. And like, that is one of these things, one of these kind of points of nuance that, Michael loved to make.
Yeah, perfect at that stuff. I mean, honestly, the best in the game at that.
Yeah.
By far.
Right. And sort of like just having an honest assessment of what the past actually is.
Right.
Not in a pedantic way, but in a way that actually shows a lot more richness and a lot more relatability to our current situation and time and experiences and what we're going through right now.
Right.
Like that is, these are things that we need to, as you said earlier, we need to thread together.
Yeah.
All of our human experiences have faced, especially in the 20th century and under, like neoliberal capitalism more recently, but before that, there are ways and methods that the ruling class people, that goes all the way back to ancient Rome even, they'll do the same shit to keep workers down.
Yeah.
And that like tactics that have not changed in 2,000-3,000 years.
Yeah.
And not to be too grandiose about it, even though I'm being pretty goddamn grandiose, but I guess understanding those dynamics and those conditions and the actions that were taken by not just the principal people on the ground who were the leaders of movements or whatever, but how did that connect to everyday people in those times, and how how can we do it today?
Yeah, and how I think there's one of the things I really loved about Michael, and that I hope we can all try to hold on to some of this, was he was uncynical without being Pollyanna, you know, and
generally warm and hopeful, and
very hopeful. Like I don't know if I've ever really heard him say this, but I just like people are good. That you know, that people are not poisoned beyond reformation always, all the time, and that the world can be changed, and that it can be changed by the will of the people through democracy, in all the ways that we can understand what democracy is, but that he really emphasized that. And I think that is something that we're constantly learning about. I think these uprisings have been a good example of ways that we can exercise democracy outside of electoralism, as some folks like to say, but also how you need some of those institutions as well sometimes because of the situation that you're in. You can't just ignore that either. No. You know, or you'll just constantly be blocked and just become cynical again and become pessimistic.
And all of your pre-existing biases are confirmed. Now,
which for some people can be more important than actually winning,
especially if you're making money off of it.
Yeah. I'm thinking of a few leftist commentators on YouTube right now. Oh boy. The moon in Lake Michigan. That guy, man. I listened to Jimmy Dore's comedy podcast when it just started, like when comedy podcast first started, and I could tell a direction he was maybe going, and just how petty he was. And sorry, I do not like that guy. There's something he upsets me a lot.
First off, let me just.
I don't know why I'm shitting on Jimmy Dore in a memorial for someone who is so much better than him, but
I'm going to be shitting on him too. But just don't want to get there, going this route. I would call what Michael kind of like the way he approached things is kind of a grounded hopefulness. Very sort of like he was hopeful, sure, and he was hopeful in like the genuine goodness of even people that most people would consider bad. And recognizing that humanity is critical, but he also, and specifically to talk about Jimmy Dore and Dave Rubin and the way that he was so aggressive with them, and Sam as well. But the reason that they were that way wasn't because I don't think they thought that they were irredeemable, even though they might be. But those are terms that specifically Dave Rubin. This might be a little bit hard for Dore. Well, maybe it is. Maybe it's not. Well,
we'll see. I don't know.
They're different in the sense that
they're different.
Rubin is much more of a hypocrite than Jimmy.
He's
Dore
just a full-on people say grifter too much. Because in many ways, some people's definition of grifter would basically be everybody operating in a capitalistic economy, But like he's a grifter in that he just like changed his politics to make money. He just didn't give a fuck.
Right. The similarity, though, with both of those guys, with the way that Michael and Sam approached them, was he was very sharp with them and very dismissive. And I think the reason he was doing that is because that is the language, that is the terms that those people will respond to. So you are activating their humanity. Specifically, this is less with Dore. Like Dore definitely, like he seems to be more of a kind of a person that like is obsessed with being popular. And being right, and being strong and coming across as strong, which kind of belies a pretty sort of weak actual convictions.
No, yeah. Well, and the thing that always bothered me about Dore, first off, is people acted like he was more left than a lot of people who's.
What does that even mean?
I know it's like because you have like a more like visceral hatred of the Democratic Party, that means you're more left. Like I honestly, I
That's like the moment of hate, like the fucking
exactly
or something.
Exactly. Like no, that doesn't make sense. But like a thing that I really appreciated about Michael, and that I hope I can do forward on this show, and I hope all of us in our own way can continue this legacy of his, is that it never seemed like when Michael was going to talk about something, he started with the conclusion and then did his research.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a constant thing.
Let me finish on Ruben real quick,
Sure.
though, and then we can sort of move on to that point because that's a good one because he would always explore. But with Ruben specifically, he was so vicious with him, and he constantly said, like, you have no actual convictions, you don't believe in anything, you are just cashing in on an opportunity, and he would say it constantly, and because that is what turns him. That is what, if he's listening, or if he, when I'm reminded of like you can't be that much of a fucking fraud without being at least a little bit guilty.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's got to be there, and like that's what he was activating. And you can tell when it got to him. I mean, this is remember the live stream that Ruben was doing, and somebody did a super chat and he was reading questions and stuff like that, and Dave Rubin like said, like the question was like, well, what do you think about like Sam Cedar and the Madeira?
Yeah, there. What? No. It was even better because it used a few like buzzwords that would get Ruben to be like, oh, huh, okay. It was like, what do you think about that SJW nonsense over at the? Hilarious. And that's the thing, though. Like, Michael definitely had his fair share of dunks, but it was never.
He didn't dunk just like on anybody. He would dunk on the people that would like that A, deserved it, and B, might actually fucking feel bad about it. Like, there's no point in dunking on Trump like 24/7 because it's not going to do anything. Well, he's not going to notice and he's not going to care.
And the thing that I found particularly helpful about him, because I think you would be lying to yourself if you wouldn't have some criticisms of people on the left while being on the left. But also, but like he was so good at avoiding both the Chud dunking and the SJW react kind of like bullshit that just yeah, right? Like he never fell into that ever. But he was able to critique all of these different things and make us better. And I think he made me better. He gave me frameworks to explain some things that I was feeling. And who knows? Maybe without Michael, I would have become like some like fucking, who knows? Like seriously, who knows? Maybe I would have become like a fucking Sargon of Akkad guy. I don't know. I like Acadia. The history, and of course, you live in modern Acadia in a lot of ways. So
that's a little bit further west, but I take your point.
You get what I mean.
Yeah,
you get what I mean.
Yeah,
but yeah. So like, it's such a loss. He was such a just a really special person. He was really important to me and my wife. Like I don't know if I've ever told this story. I like messaged it to the Majority Report once or twice, but the text, whenever you would do like an IM to them, they would never read like a really long one, but this one kind of is a bit of a story, but I guess we'll kind of finish with this, at least for me. And the reason why I have this crazy background, by the way, is because I'm set up right near the door and my wife has to go in and out. And I don't know, maybe she doesn't want to be on screen, which honestly would make sense. You're not as much of a maniac as me. So about a year into me and my wife being together, she got thyroid cancer. We were 26. And it was terrifying. I had like never loved anyone that much. I had never felt like I could be myself as much with anyone. She really helped me through some really tough times, like where I, like tried to go back to school and just like, I don't know, I just was feeling really sort of hopeless and meaningless, but she was with me when I got back into doing childcare work, and it was really a very important time for me in figuring out who I am and what my own purpose in my life is, and how I shouldn't be ashamed of who I am. And I was a little ashamed, I think, of listening to so many political podcasts. And this sort of goes into it. So she had to have surgery and to remove her thyroid and get rid of the cancerous cells. And they got rid of most of it, but they couldn't get rid of all of it. And she had to do a pretty dangerous thing where she went and took a radiation pill, and it was so intense she couldn't be at the apartment that we were living at. Ironically, I was living with Ari too at the time. And she had to go away. I couldn't see her. I couldn't be with her. And it was incredibly scary. Like, I didn't know if she was going to live. And we were so young. And this was
26.
What?
26.
I think 26, 27. It was around the time of the primary when Trump ran.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like young. I mean, we're turning 33 this week because our birthdays are one day apart, which is weird. But, hey, whatever. It's beautiful. They say, too, Leos can't work, but, you know,
You're still older.
Yeah, exactly. In about 12 hours, I'll be able to just... I'll be accused of grooming her was the joke I said, but I feel like on Twitter someone will say that. But so she had to go away for like a week, and I couldn't see her, and she didn't really know what to do, and I had sent her once a like funny clip on the Majority Report, and she went ahead and she watched all of their old Republican primary debate streams. Every single one of them. Things that I always felt was too fucking dorky. I was like, I don't know if she can get into this shit. Like, I was like, is this just some like dumb dude shit? And she watched all of them. And she would call me about how much she loved it and how much she loved Michael. And it was at that moment that, like, I knew I really loved her and that I wanted to marry her, you know? And
It's a really sweet story.
yeah, and, like, the fact that he's gone is really, really hard.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
She's doing better now, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard because it just to the nature of it, your medications, you know, it fluctuates, but you know, it just makes me sad that I was never able to tell Michael that.
Well,
So yeah,
I would I mean, maybe you could email you know, the show and and story with them. They might really appreciate hearing that right now. Just because, I mean, they're going through some loss, and you know, I mean, some loss, like, hello.
Exactly.
We know about the person that they lost, but I guess that's one thing that, like, you know, they might appreciate it. So maybe go ahead and do that.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll just clip it. It's a hard story to tell. I don't know. It's yeah, it's been such a hard year, but you know, like, just thinking about how much of the world I was exposed to just by his words, and his humor, you know, like, I don't think I would be the person I am today without him. And I think a lot of people are realizing how important he was, and just how important it is that we love and respect each other, and honestly that we let go of a lot of this sectarian bullshit, really, that we look beyond our immediate circle and our immediate incentives. And yeah, he was a really great man, you know. So salute Michael. He was one of the best, And the quote a lot of folks are saying right now is, I'm going to paraphrase it. I kind of remember it, but it's a quote of Lula the day before he went to prison about, sorry, how, those in power can cut down 1 to 100 roses, but they can't stop the coming of spring,
Yeah, that's beautiful. And
yeah, and just because we lost one of our leaders, it doesn't mean that we can't keep fighting for what matters,
in fact, if we don't do that, then that would be a betrayal.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I really wasn't expecting I was going to cry this much, especially considering it's literally live on the internet, but I don't fucking care. Like, it's really vital, I think, that we think about not just what Michael represents, but just how important those people around us are, and how important, and we need to acknowledge those leaders and those people who connect with us, not for some particular reason to build some particular political clout, but and to speak proudly of those that we learn from. So if there's anything else you wanted to say, Jeff.
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, you were definitely closer and had a deeper sort of connection with like the principles that were involved in the show. And with Michael himself, you had more seemingly direct contact, but and I'm really, I mean, what you said was really beautiful, and I really want to let you know that.
Yeah,
and,
thanks.
Yeah, I think it was Jamie or something that posted in her tweet. See you in the fun half.
Yeah. See,
which I thought was here's the tweet. I found it.
Yeah.
I can't believe we're never going to give each other side eye again. I will miss our discussions, our jokes, and even our engagement. Rest in power, Michael Brooks. You were one of a kind. See you in the fun half.
Yeah.
With her black heart.
Yeah. Perfect.
Anyway.
Yeah.
That's just really good. A good.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. We're gonna miss you, Michael. But I don't know. Like I don't think he's going away.
No.
Like he had so much content out there. I couldn't believe how much that guy worked. That I think folks are going to be revisiting a lot of his work for decades.
I mean, I'm scrolling through his YouTube channel right now.
Yeah. There's just so much fucking shit out there, and we should be grateful that we live in an era where we could really capture that, that we were able to capture some of these conversations and these moments in, their entirety in ways that we couldn't in previous eras of mass political change.
I do have one more point, actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead, brother, please.
But and Wosny Lambre said this yesterday on the Majority Report, and multiple other people commented sort of to this effect as well. That and it's reflected in the way that he sort of like ran his show. He basically said that Michael treated everyone as equals, and he gave people like an enormous part of the show that he did to other people, providing platforms for other people. He would do a lot of interviews. Our friend Ben Burgess was who wrote an absolutely heartbreaking post about it on
that was
Facebook.
the first post by anyone that I read about it, and it hit me like a ton of bricks.
I had no idea that they were that close, but I mean, he had a regular recurring segment on Michael's show. He Joshua Kahn Russell, like you were saying
Yeah.
earlier,
Yeah.
and he had recurring guests.
That were not like the people you would be like, oh, this is, like it wasn't like another YouTuber or like some bread tube weirdo, like it was people who he respected, and that was enough.
And Anna Kasparian and just a whole bunch of really, really smart, and Emma Vigeland, very smart, interesting people.
Yeah.
That were integral to the sort of, little family that they have. So see you in the fun half.
See you in the fun half. All right, I think I'm gonna stop the stream then. Here we go. I did